Hello and welcome to What's Happening, a show where we discuss EV news around the world with Omkar and Manish. So, Manish, how's it going?
Very good. This is episode number 5, and
Yeah.
this is our wrap up for last month, I think.
Yes, and just a disclaimer: if you hear construction noises, that's just Bombay. We have nothing to do with it.
Nothing but redevelopment in this part of town, so there's always banging, there's trucks, you'll hear everything.
Yeah. So let's jump right into the news. It's been a bit of a slow month, but still some of very interesting news coming out of both India and in the US. So first news coming out of our homegrown Bangalore company, Ultraviolet. They launched the F77 Mach 2. So Ultraviolet is a very interesting company. If you've been following their journey, they are probably one of the most coolest, I would say, company to come out of India. Both the founders were designers at heart, so it was a design first, then product later. The sketch of the F77, they built it when they were in college. So it was essentially every boy's dream, when you sketch as a young child the bike and you kind of make it in reality. So it was something like that for them. But they've been at it for quite a while now. Started in 2017 per se. They had their early prototypes ready in 2019 itself. So in 2019 they had a lot of media runs, giving the bikes to a lot of media folks essentially to test it out, and they were supposed to launch in 2020, but alas, the COVID hit and the launch essentially got delayed by a lot. So last year itself, they launched the first model, which was the F77, and which again featured a lot of interesting things. So they had the biggest battery pack in any two-wheeler across the world. So it was a 10 kilowatt hour battery pack. So did a lot of interesting stuff with that. And they launched at that point of time. Starting price was somewhere about 3.5 to 3.9 lakhs. It went up to as high as 4.5 lakhs. But then a few months later, now they've launched the Mark II, which starts at 2.9 lakhs and has some of the features, like some of the specs. If you go through it, it is features 40 HP and 100 Newton meters of torque. It has a range of 323 kilometers and 10 levels of regen. So when you compare this particular specs with let's say a equivalent of an IC, which I think in this price point would be a KTM 390, the specs are almost at par with that. So I think after multiple iterations and stuff, they finally have a particular product which essentially looks very, very interesting, and a consumer who would essentially go for a KTM 390 would at least have a very interesting consideration in front of them. So what do you think?
No, so I think it was you had mentioned that it's owned partly by TVS. So I'm always concerned with these two-wheelers because if they don't have any sort of big backing, I can see a lot of them just kind of going away. But I think obviously backing from TVS means that obviously rock solid team, and they've got the financial support, if things kind of get rough. But yeah, this is very much targeted at the higher end segment, almost like I'd say, Mercedes, Rolls-Royce level when you compare what else is out in the market. And so yeah, as you mentioned, the Mod 2, brand new, and it looks very interesting. You said, it's the only bike that has got dual channel ABS available in India. So a lot of interesting features that are in the product, and kind of pushing the entire evolution of the EV two-wheeler space moving
There's
forward.
nobody like them. So if you look, it's very interesting because if you see the Indian two-wheeler bike market, not the scooter market. Scooter is of course the mass market product, but if you see the bike market, there's nobody, right? If you have Torque, which comes at starts at 1.5 lakhs, but that's a commuter segment. You have the Aura Mantis, which they've launched it but still struggling with the production at this point of time, but that's also a 250cc sort of an equivalent, but where they are playing right now, where Ultraviolet is playing right now, there's just nobody, and I think they have a very interesting opportunity over here. When KTM was initially launched in India, essentially people said that it's not going to work. Right? It's not going to work. Nobody's going to spend 3.5 lakhs, or when it was initially launched, it was 3.5 lakhs, right? Nobody's going to buy a bike of that high price. And India is a commuter market. Only splendors of the world work over here, and it proved wrong. I was just reading last couple of weeks ago that KTM, the KTM has essentially sold almost 10 million bikes in India.
Oh wow, I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
wow.
It's 10 million bikes.
Well,
in India.
I would say it's 10 million bikes, but what more so is they've built a massive community. I hear people that are diehard KTMers.
Exactly.
So I think they've built that community around.
So it's kind of not a fair comparison between Ultraviolet and KTM, but it's the segment in general, which is the premium segment in India, and I think it kind of works. And Ultraviolet now essentially is very well positioned to attack that particular market. The product is amazing, the design is amazing, the entire brand is very aspirational. So I really think and hope that they really make it through. Yeah,
let's hope.
All right. So second news. This is kind of a big one. It took everybody by storm. But Tesla announced almost 10% of their staff, laid off 10% of their staff, and also the entire SuperCharger team. So let's go at it.
Yeah. So that was actually, this was just announced, I think, about a month ago, and then just literally a week ago, they announced the entire supercharging team was laid off. And so I think part of the issue is now people are trying to, connect the dots, saying, EVs in general are going down, hence, Tesla had to lay off. But I think part of it is maybe they've ramped up a lot, they've hired a lot of people, and I think that may be the reason why for the 10% layoffs. I think the bigger mystery is around the entire supercharging network, because that is really one of the biggest strengths in the US is, you get a Tesla, you don't have to worry about charging because, it's integrated with the software and it'll route you. So if you want to go from LA to New York, you put that in there, it'll actually tell you how to get there and where are the superchargers available, what are the locations, which one are online, which are offline, all of that stuff. And that's the main selling point of it. And the fact that, they've laid off that entire team, and that entire team is just not the technology, just not the charging units, but it's also the real estate teams. All of those guys have been laid off. So that is actually what's really surprising, and that it happened overnight. And so people are kind of shocked, saying that, they went into the office, they tried to put their proximity badge, the door reader, and it didn't open. And then they would finally get an email saying, hey, you've been laid off. And then the worst part is they said it's just, dear employee, you've been laid off. And not even a dear, such and such person. It wasn't personalized. So a lot of stuff. But I think the bottom line is that's playing into the narrative that, Tesla itself is, having sales challenges and, moving forward. But I just feel they've ramped up too much.
But I feel the impact of this largely on the industry is going to be huge. Layoff, of course, is one part of it, but how volatile the market is going to be. If you look at it from other OEMs' perspective, who are now announced that they're going to be on the NACS charging standard, essentially they have put their entire money on the supercharging team and Elon Musk not messing it up, essentially, right? So it's super scary situation. I don't think nobody accounted for this, of how volatile the decision can be, right? Tomorrow, let's say, knowing Elon Musk, if he essentially decides to shut down the entire supercharging network, what will happen?
Yeah,
because they're stuck with the NACS charging standard anyway right now. So that's what I think I'm pretty sure that a lot of OEMs must be having this discussion in their boardrooms on what should be our backup plan, and should we still try and have some bit of our chargers also now, because you cannot leave everything to Tesla is what I think is net right now, especially after this particular discussion, particular layoff that has happened.
No, so that's one of the things that they're mentioning on Twitter, is it may be a way for him to kind of let go of the supercharger team and then actually hive off the entire supercharging network and roll it into a new company and then sell that asset off. So that's also one of the theories. Of course, there's a lot of theories on Twitter. You never know, but it actually makes sense, a way to monetize, kind of decouple it from the main Tesla stock and say, hey, this is a really big asset, so let's just kind of, float this as a separate business unit, which sort of makes sense. And based on what I'm seeing with them getting rid of the team, I totally can see that actually happening, which would be scary if you are trying to put all of your eggs in one basket. If you're a Ford or you're a GM, and you're kind of saying, hey, we want to move to the NACS standard, and then all of a sudden, it's a separate company, you don't really know what's going to happen.
And then the other side of it, they also announced the new Model 3 Performance.
Yeah, so the new Model 3 was announced, and as typical, Elon has, a thing for comparing the EV models that he has to, a very fast production car that's already out there. So he compared it to the M3 Competition Edition. And in fact, I was looking at the numbers, and it's actually faster than the 911. Now, if you look at the 911, there are actually, I think there's 26 variants of the 911 today, the 992 version. It beats all of the variants except the Turbo S model. So the Turbo S, and then the Cabriolet versions, but it beats even the the GT3 RS, all of those. So it does, of course, straight line comparison. But more importantly, everyone was expecting this would be the plaid version, and they've hinted that this is the performance version, and then the plaid version is still yet to come. So, and when you compare the specs of it, it's going to come in at around $53,000 in the US. 0 to 60 time is around 2.9 seconds. So again, just some crazy numbers. If you had to compare horsepower, an M3 versus a Model 3, they're pretty similar in the 500 horsepower range. So that was at least one of the good things, that Tesla had a lot of negative information, a lot of negative news, but at least they can now kind of say, hey, we've got a new model coming out, line extension of the Model 3.
True, and I think he has some personal vendetta against Porsche. To be honest, when during the Cybertruck launch, I think when the finally launched, I remember they did a drag race with the 911, with the Cybertruck towing another 911. So I think he has some personal vendetta against these guys. I always want to compare that.
So I wouldn't say it's a personal vendetta, but it's the 911 is an iconic sports car, and everyone can relate to it. It's been around for 60 plus years as a sports vehicle. So so that when that Cybertruck ad came out, everybody's like, wow, we're going to be towing a 911 and we're going to beat a 911. So obviously.
I think it's definitely very cool. I think with the new Model 3 launch, Tesla definitely is, of course, looking at very longevity, going through a lot of issues with the products currently, but I think still far ahead compared to what is out there in the market. He was notoriously famous for announcing products and not delivering them, or at least delivering them very, very late. But I think now you really see post-COVID, post-lockdown, the way Tesla has sort of gotten into pace in terms of delivering products. I think that's very interesting. Yeah. I think talking about announcing products and not launching them, finally the new electric G-Wagon is sort of announced, launched.
Yes. Yeah, so it was actually happened about 10 days ago in Los Angeles. They had a big press event. So this is the new G-Wagon platform. And then the first one that they actually released was the electric version of it. So the press has been calling it the EQS for the longest time. And so they finally announced the name. It's going to be called the, what did I say? It's going to be called the EQ. No, it's going to be called the G580 with EQ technology. Yeah. So it is a mouthful. So one is, of course, the G-Wagon E version was released, but the thing is, when you look at the specs, it's actually really not that good, the specs. Pricing is at around $180,000, 116 kilowatt hour battery pack with only a 250 mile EPA range, which is really not that good. And part of it is because, the G-Wagons themselves are very heavy, and then now with the battery pack makes it even more so. But now because they expect some people to off-road, and I can't imagine too many, maybe one or two people will take this G-Wagon off-roading, but there's actually a 1-inch thick steel skid plate underneath, and I think that's also adding to the weight of the G-Wagon.
Yeah. Well, that's and as you said, looking at the specs, I mean, this vehicle was anticipated for so long now. Everybody was so excited. We spoke about the tank turns, and it looks lovely. But looking at the specs, it's very underwhelming. Very, very underwhelming. I don't know how in a 116 kilowatt hour battery they're just getting a 250 mile range. And again, in that, it's only 200 kilowatt charging. So not the best of the best specs. But I think still cater to the right market, honestly. That market, I don't know if people want to do that long drives in a G-Wagon, right? They just want to go around the city probably. So maybe it would work, but I really want to see the real world reviews of this particular vehicle, because I think that'll be very interesting what the people's perception of this is, because G-Wagon has, just like the 911, has its own sort of cult following. So